So let's get this show on the road. So thank you everyone so much for joining. I am Dr. Marinelli. I am the Director of Advising with MedSchoolCoach. Again, appreciate everyone taking their time tonight to learn a little bit more about osteopathic medicine. I think this will be a really great webinar. Tonight we are joined by Dr. Anthony Martin. He serves as the Assistant Dean of Clinical Affairs at Marian University College of Osteopathic Medicine. He's an internal medicine doctor, and he's also the first DO physician that was elected to serve as the medical staff president in the 100-year history of his hospital in Indiana. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm also joined here by Briana, who's been in higher education for years, and she is the Application Services and Outreach Manager for AACOM. So I'll probably mess it up, but the American Association College of Osteopathic Medicine.
You got it.
Okay. So she manages the AACOM application. And, I've always said it AACOM, so feel free to correct me because I don't know what's the official lingo, but she's going to be providing a lot of information to prospective students that are interested in pursuing osteopathic medicine. Briana, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and welcome to everyone who's here. Thank you for spending, an hour of your evening or afternoon with us to learn a little bit more about osteopathic medicine. So Dr. Martin and I are just gonna chat with you guys for a little bit about what osteopathic medicine is and how to figure out if it's the right fit for you. And like Renee said, we'll leave some time at the end to field some questions. So a lot of you may know this already, but in the US, there are two pathways to become a physician. One pathway is the MD, and the other pathway is the DO. Osteopathic medicine is the DO pathway. And a lot of times we get asked, well, if they're both doctors, then what's the difference? And that's a really great question. So what I like to tell people is that there are two things that are distinctive about osteopathic medicine. One of those things is the philosophy that guides the practice. So DOs tend to take a whole person approach to wellness. And I'm going to play you just a brief video clip that talks a little bit about what that means.
From small towns to big cities, the White House to the front lines, even at the edge of space, osteopathic physicians are everywhere. DOs are called to care and inspired to cure. We enable all people to pursue health and wellness through the power of connection. The journey begins at our colleges of osteopathic medicine, where training is grounded in the connection between body, mind, and spirit. Our education connects humanistic, caring perspectives with modern medicine and research, preparing students to treat whole people, not isolated symptoms. We emphasize the connection between patient and doctor by learning to listen and listening to learn. We unlock the power of a physician's hands to diagnose and treat, recognizing the reciprocal connection between structure and function. Pioneers in preventative medicine, we promote the body's natural tendency toward health and self-healing. At the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine, we exist to connect you to the people championing the collective interests of our community and the power that this connection can bring, all driven by the philosophy that connects DOs everywhere, that the human body is infinitely capable, and so are you.
So that's a little bit of a quick bird's eye view into the whole person approach to osteopathic medicine. And that approach is grounded in 4 major tenets. Now, I won't read them to you, but they are on the screen here for you to see. And I will actually invite Dr. Martin to talk just a little bit about, what these tenets mean to you and how they've informed your practice in your teaching.
Absolutely. Thank you. These 4 tenets of osteopathic medicine, it's really kind of like almost our core values of what we think about when I'm taking care of a patient. And, maybe I'm struggling with what the diagnosis is or how we should treat that. I can go back to these tenets and remember these things, and it kind of grounds the way that I think about things, the way that I approach a problem or a symptom or a person or a patient. And so really, this whole structure and function is really at the center of my practice.
That's amazing. Something else that we get a lot of questions about is osteopathic manipulative medicine, which is the second distinctive thing about becoming a DO. So DOs are the only physicians that are required to complete osteopathic manipulative medicine training. I know it's a mouthful, it's OMM for short. And if you'll bear with me, I've got just another brief video clip that I'm gonna play for you so you can hear directly from medical students themselves what OMM is and why it's so valuable.
For me, osteopathic manipulative medicine, it's really a system of hands-on diagnosis and treatment that's an extension of our traditional medical training.
So it's really helping put things back into place to help the body function better as a unit and to allow the patient to heal faster, which is the ultimate goal of patient care.
The idea of using our hands to touch the patient and touch the patient in a way to diagnose and treat.
You know, the body is laid out anatomically in a very certain way. Everyone pretty much has the same anatomy, and if anything goes wrong in the stream of things, it can really affect the person's health or ability to move around in space and really affect their overall well-being.
OMM to me is not only understanding the illness beyond the biology, but it's also providing relief to the patient by the simple touch.
What we look for in the body, we kind of say we look for 4 things, which are tenderness in areas, asymmetry, restricted motion, and just changes in the tissue texture, whether it's joints that feel maybe a little swollen or inflamed or muscles that are tight. And we look for these areas around the bodies and additionally the ways that people compensate for these specific dysfunctions.
If someone has a back pain, you know, not too long after that, they will develop a knee pain. And oftentimes they will ask me why. And the reason why is because the body is interconnected.
What we look to do is balance these out, get their pain down, get their tenderness down, so that they're able to function more optimally. Because we believe when we get the body and the person to function more optimally, they're able to heal better long-term and empower the patient to do things on their own in the future that help them maintain their health.
So that's a little bit about osteopathic manipulative medicine. And DO students complete 200 hours of training in OMM, and we've actually built that training into the curriculum. So you're going to do that within your standard 4 years of medical school. There's no additional time to degree in order to get this skill, but it does serve as a really useful tool beyond medication and surgery that can help doctors alleviate pain, restore motion, and support the body's natural healing processes that you heard about in that video. Dr. Martin, how useful has OMM been for you?
It's an amazing tool to have, you know, when it's needed. I'll give you an example. I had a baseball pitcher that came in with elbow pain. Pretty common. Normally we could put topical NSAIDs on it. We could treat it with some oral therapy, send them to some physical therapy for their elbow and try to get things better. But on that osteopathic exam, we actually found the problem wasn't the elbow. The pain was in the elbow, but the problem was in the rotator cuff. So we were able to loosen up that rotator cuff in a series of treatments. And when the rotator cuff structure and function was appropriate, the pitcher's elbow pain went away. So that's just an example of that. You know, you have to have the right structure for things to function properly.
Very cool. I love that OMM is built into the curriculum for students, and that all the DOs kind of have that in their tool belt to help alleviate pain. I'm sure that comes up super often. When we are out and about talking to prospective students like you, a lot of times we hear this really common misconception that DOs only practice in primary care. And so I wanted to take a minute just to break down the stats for you all to kind of bump that misconception. So while a majority of our DOs who practice are in primary care, somewhere around 57%, we do have about 43% of practicing DOs who work in specialties. Things like emergency medicine, things like anesthesiology, surgery, psychiatry, all of those things are possible as a career path with the DO. We also have a number of folks who don't practice directly, but go into areas like research, clinical education, policy, and administration. So I wanted to just take a couple of seconds to kind of dispel that myth. And Dr. Martin, do you have anything that you want to add when it comes to, talking to students about what careers are available to them if they become a DO?
I completely agree with that. And I brought our school statistics, and they're exactly what you're saying right there. We match up, exactly just like that. And, you can be whatever you want to be as an osteopathic physician. There's really no limits. We see our students match into surgical specialties, into ENT, ophthalmology, primary care. Like, if you can dream it, you can achieve it in this specialty just as much as the other. So I would not let that limit your investigation of osteopathic medicine.
Absolutely. I love the way you phrase that. Anything is possible with a DO, and osteopathic medicine is actually one of the fastest growing fields. I think right now, about a quarter of all med students in the US are studying to become a DO, and they're predicting that by 2026, DOs are going to account for a third. So it's definitely fast growing, not only in the number of students, but also in the number of schools that are offering DO programs. So one thing to know about osteopathic medicine is that there is a commitment within the field to provide care in rural and urban underserved areas. And you can see that in this map here. It's reflected in the location of our medical schools. We have colleges of osteopathic medicine, or we like to say COMs for short. We have COMs all over the US, and our network is growing. Just in the past few years, we've had 3 new schools come online. Dr. Martin, what's your kind of reaction or your sense of how the field is growing and changing?
I think it's one of the best times to be a part of osteopathic medicine. Maybe it was as cool when Andrew Taylor still was developing things, but I mean, it's one of the fastest growing areas of healthcare in the world right now. So I'm excited to be a part of it. We would love for you all to investigate it more and be a part of it. And so it's a really fun time to be a DO for sure. And really, there's a synergism between allopathic and osteopathic schools, right? We're meeting the needs of the patients that are in our country. So we go where the patient's needs are. And for us, a lot of times that is in an underserved area. And that's a particular passion of mine. I treated patients in rural Appalachia in southeastern Kentucky. And there's lots of opportunities to serve where people need you.
I love that call for people to investigate osteopathic medicine a little bit more. I think that's probably, if I had to make a list of, the top 5 questions that we get, that would definitely be in the top 5 is like, well, how do I know if osteopathic medicine is right for me? Or how do I choose between MD and DO? And so a lot of what we direct students to think about is that philosophy and whether or not the osteopathic approach to medicine really resonates with them. And our team really sat down and we thought about, what kind of doctors are DOs and what kind of students would make really good doctors. And so we put together this graphic here. And if you see anything that resonates with you, then DO might be the right career path for you. If you're someone who leads with compassion, values community involvement, if you're interested in preventative care, then DO might be something for you to seriously consider and investigate. If you're interested in becoming the type of doctor who does the things that you see listed on this screen, then I would definitely encourage you to check out some of our colleges of osteopathic medicine. Would you say this tracks, Dr. Martin, or are these some of the qualities that students should be keeping in mind?
100%. And I hear this from the students. I've served on the admissions committee of our COM, and as I talk to students that are really interested, as I investigated this myself on an allopathic campus, I spent a lot of time there investigating that. Spent a lot of time on osteopathic medicine campus as well. And this is exactly the things that I thought through, and these aligned up with, hey, what type of physician do I see myself becoming? And in that picture that I had in my mind, a lot of these things, filled in parts of that picture of who I wanted to become. So it was an easy match.
That's incredible. And did you find that when you were a student, other students and the faculty kind of shared these values?
We really see a lot of these same things in our faculty, in our COMs. They embrace a lot of these same values. And so it's easy to have that camaraderie with your fellow students and your COM faculty. when these things line up, and it's just an easy fit. I remember thinking to myself, I feel like I'm at home in this comm.
And that's a great feeling because med school is a long 4 years.
It
And
is.
so I'm sure it goes a long way to feel like you're among like-minded people.
That's right.
Yeah. So now that Dr. Martin and I have convinced you to choose osteopathic medicine, we want to switch gears a little bit and talk about actually applying and what that process looks like and what you can do to prepare. So I want to be very clear, admission to osteopathic medical school is competitive. Our comms are looking for purpose-driven applicants who excel academically. What does that mean? Now, admissions requirements are going to vary from school to school, but generally speaking, you're going to want to complete a year of biology, physics, and English, and then 2 years of chemistry. So we are looking for all those prerequisite courses. Of course, we're looking for you to have competitive grades in those courses. So comms are going to be looking at your overall GPA, and they're going to be looking specifically at your science GPA. So those technical classes that you've taken, how have you performed in those classes? And then we also require MCAT scores. Excuse me. And I'll talk a little bit more about MCAT scores because I know that's the thing that tends to make everyone nervous. So I will share these stats with you just to give you, kind of a sense of where the last matriculating class, or I guess the 2023 matriculating class, where their MCAT scores kind of fell on average. So you can see that reflected in this chart here. And I want to emphasize that MCAT scores are only one of the many factors that schools are evaluating, but it is important to prevent competitive scores. So again, if you take the MCAT, if you've already taken the MCAT, and you see these numbers here and you're like, oh, I didn't have this exact number or higher, don't count yourself out. This is just meant to present you with a general sense of whether or not you're in range of what matriculating students, how they're performing. Dr. Martin, what's your take on the MCAT? I know this is the thing that tends to have students up late.
Yeah, and I sweated it. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the test. A lot of people are not great standardized test takers, and I understand that. The way that you can look at the MCAT is it's one data point in your application. I think the thing that I want to stress is that the comms are looking to find out who you are, right? We really want to weave mission and osteopathic philosophy and osteopathic tenets with our education. And so it's not just your GPA. You are not a GPA. You are not an MCAT score. And so that application process is really more about, we want to get to know who you are and what your values are and what motivates you and things like that. Those things are powerful, much more than an MCAT score.
That's a really great transition into my next slide, actually, which is that in addition to, test scores and your GPA, schools are also looking for certain personal qualities. They want well-rounded individuals who are going to make, doctors that can relate to their patients, that care about their patients, and that are going to practice medicine with integrity and great character. So the qualities that you see listed here are the things that our most competitive applicants display. They're going to have really strong communication and interpersonal skills. They're going to have some kind of record of community service and leadership. They're going to have taken, the effort to get some clinical experience prior to applying to medical school. Their record might show that they have a variety of extracurricular activities, that they come from a diverse background, and most importantly, that they know specifically what osteopathic medicine is and that they're interested in practicing medicine as a doctor of osteopathic medicine. So these are things that admissions folks are going to be looking for. Dr. Martin, how are these things evaluated in the admissions process? Like, how can applicants demonstrate that to you?
Yeah, I think this is really important. And students that don't get into medical school often ask me, why didn't I get in? And they say, I had this phenomenal GPA. My MCAT was off the charts, and I still didn't get into medical school. What happened? And oftentimes it's these things that is lacking in their application and in their interview and just in the person that they are displaying to the admissions committee and the comms in the medical schools. So they're really wanting to get to know you. And when I'm talking to a student and all of a sudden they are able to reference some time maybe that they spent with a DO, my ears perk up, right? Okay, all right, so you took the time to spend some time with an osteopathic physician, maybe see OMM or experience OMM or something like that. That personal connection carries a huge amount of weight in your ability to understand what we're all about.
Absolutely. So we're going to switch gears again and talk a little bit about the application itself, so that all of you on the call are familiar with how it's structured, what it looks like, and where specifically in the application you're able to demonstrate all of these qualities. So when you're ready to apply, you will do so via the AACOM website. So at AACOM, we manage AACOMIS, which is that big acronym that you heard Renee mention at the start of this call. And that's the centralized application system that allows you to apply to multiple schools with one application. I will quickly mention that there is an exception. State medical schools in Texas have their own state mandated system. So if you're looking at Texas schools, then you'll use the Texas Medical and Dental School application service. But for colleges of osteopathic medicine in all other states, you're going to use the AACOMIS application. It's fairly self-explanatory, but I'll walk you through it pretty quickly. And if you have any questions as I'm going through it, please drop it in the chat. One of my colleagues is in there right now answering some questions, and we'll answer the remaining questions live on air when we get to the end. Excuse me. So the first thing I will share is the application timeline. If you're planning to apply this year, the application is currently open. It opened on May 6th, and it's going to close on June 13th. Each college is going to have their own deadline within that window. So even though the cycle is open from May to June, that does not mean that all comms are accepting applications from May to June. So you want to make sure that you are visiting each comm's website and making sure that you are keeping track of when their deadlines are, because those deadlines are going to vary. And a lot of comms do admissions on a rolling basis. So what that means is that as the applications are coming in, admissions officers are reviewing and making decisions about applications, and they're going to do that while the cycle is open up until their deadline. So we like to tell students that the earlier you can apply, the better, but we also like to tell students the flip side of that coin, which is don't apply until you're ready. So you want to present your most competitive self as soon as you are able, but you don't want to apply before you're ready, and you don't want to apply too late if you are ready sooner. And just to get a little bit more specific, if it's helpful to know, about 50% of all the applications that we're going to receive in a cycle come in by July. And by October, we've already received 90% of all the applications that we're going to get in a cycle. So that's just a little bit of information to help you kind of plot out your timeline for when you're planning to apply. If you're not applying this year, but you're planning to apply in a future cycle, just know that the cycle will always open on the first Monday of May, and it's going to close on the second Friday of June. So the application itself, once you make your account, it's going to take you to this home page with this dashboard, and you're going to see 4 quadrants, and these 4 quadrants represent the 4 sections of the application, and this home screen here tracks your completion of the application. So as you can imagine, once a quadrant is filled in with green and you've got that little check mark, that means that you've answered all the questions. If a quadrant has that progress bar that doesn't quite go all the way around, that means that you've missed a question somewhere, and you won't be able to hit submit on your application until you have completed all 4 quadrants of the application. So the application is going to ask you for personal information. It's going to ask you for your academic history. There will be a space for you to enter supporting information, and then there will be a space for you to investigate program materials. When it comes to personal information, I want to emphasize that the transcript entry section is a really involved process. So you're going to have to individually enter every single course that you have taken at your current institution, if you've taken courses at another institution and transferred them, all of your higher education courses, you do have to individually enter them, and that can be a little time consuming. So I like to warn students about that up front, and I encourage students to create an account. Like once you know that you definitely want to apply to a DO school, you can go in and create your account and start entering some of your basic information, your personal info, and your academic history. And the nice thing about AACOM is that it saves your information and you can roll it over from cycle to cycle. So let's say you're planning to apply next cycle. You can create your account right now and you can go in and enter all your personal information and start entering all your courses in your academic history. And then next cycle, when you log in, the home screen will prompt you and say, do you want to roll over your information from your previous application? And a lot of students find that that's super helpful because when it actually comes time to apply, you don't want to be sitting down and starting from the beginning because it does take quite a bit of time to do that. I will note that you do have the opportunity to pay for a professional transcript entry service that will enter your courses for you. There is an additional cost for that. Right now, that cost is $80 for up to 3 transcripts, $110 for 4 to 6 transcripts, and $150 for 7 or more. And that professional transcript entry service process does take 10 days. So you want to keep that deadline in mind. If you're planning to apply to a school that has a deadline of September 1st, you want to make sure, and you're planning to use that transcript service, you want to make sure that you're starting that, well before August 20th to give them time to enter and time for you to review. We do require official copies of your transcript and your MCAT scores. Yes, you do have to manually enter all of your courses, and then we're going to ask you to send in an official copy of your transcript, and we will match that up to what you've entered in your application, and that process is called the verification process. I just want to note that we only accept transcripts from US and English-speaking Canadian institutions. If you've taken a course at a foreign institution, then those transcripts do need to be evaluated. And if you have questions about that, you can send us an email and we're happy to walk you through that process. We do also require official MCAT scores. Like I said, you want to make sure that when you are taking the MCAT, you send your scores to AACOM. And once you send those scores to AACOM, then we're able to match your scores to your application with that MCAT ID. If you don't send your scores to AACOM, even though you've taken the MCAT, we won't receive your MCAT scores. So you want to make sure that you're sending them to us. And when you're filling out the application in that personal information section, make sure that you include your MCAT ID number so that we're able to match up your scores to your application. If you are worried about whether or not your scores have arrived, you can actually view the status of your application in the check status tab on that home screen, which I'll show you later. And that way you can monitor the progress of whether your transcripts and your scores have been received. And if it's been too much time, then you'll know to follow up. So the supporting information quadrant is where you highlight your experiences that Dr. Martin and I talked about, where you get to show the admissions committee who you are beyond your grades and your test scores. So this is your opportunity to show off all those personal traits that we talked about earlier. Anything and everything should be included. Things that demonstrate your passion, your skills, and your character, whether they're paid or unpaid, whether they're healthcare related or not. We encourage students to give admissions committees the full picture of who you are, how you spend your time, and what's important to you. So in the application, you'll see this prompt that you see on the screen here to kind of give you some guidelines about what to share. And so that's available to you. And in addition to your experiences, we do also ask for letters of evaluation. Each COM is going to have their own requirements for how many, but AACOM itself will allow you to submit up to 6 letters of support to support your application. So if you are planning to apply and you haven't already started building those relationships, I would say it's really important to build relationships with faculty members, supervisors, and other people who can speak to your experiences, speak to your character, and speak to your passion for osteopathic medicine and for your aptitude to become, a compassionate doctor. Dr. Martin, would you say that's fair?
Absolutely. The holistic review, we want to know what do other people think about you that you've worked with, or what other things are you passionate about? So that's a huge part of this, of us really trying to get to know, as much as we can about you.
Absolutely. And another space where you'll have the opportunity to do that is your personal statement. This is what the personal statement prompt screen looks like in AACOMS. It's a really small box. I think it gives you up to about 5,000 characters, and the prompt is not terribly specific, and that's by design. We do tell students to be sure to emphasize their passion for osteopathic medicine, but beyond that, AACOMS itself does not provide any specific guidelines about what to include in the personal statement. Dr. Martin, what's your take on this?
When I would review applications, this was one of my favorite parts of the entire dossier. To be able to sit down, it's like I almost want to get a cup of coffee and just sit down with these personal statements, because it's so much of your story that you've written throughout your life to get where you are. And it's really our chance just to get a little peek, into the window of what's been going on in your life, and why you want to do this, and the things that you've been through. So, that personal statement for me is huge in helping me, kind of figure out what's important to you, and how you got where you are.
Absolutely. That's really great advice. The other thing I will mention about the application is that every college that you plan to apply to is going to have their own page. Sometimes this gets missed, and students often ask us, like, what's the status of my application? Why doesn't it say that it's complete yet? And it's because they haven't gone in to that fourth quadrant to look at the college pages. So you can see in this example here, there are 4 colleges that this applicant has selected: AT Stills, 2 campuses, Alabama Com, and Arizona Com. And each of those schools are going to have their own page that look like what you see here. So there's going to be a home screen that tells you a little bit more about the institution itself. And then there are going to be 2 more tabs, one labeled questions and the other labeled prerequisites, which are appropriately named. Some schools have additional questions that they're going to want you to answer as part of your application. So you want to make sure that you're clicking over to that college page and navigating to that questions tab and answering those questions. And then that prerequisite tab is just there for you as another place to be sure that you're meeting all of the admissions requirements before you submit and pay for that application. Now, once you've submitted your application, it's going to go through 4 stages before it can be viewed by a school, and you're going to want to monitor these stages in your AACOMS account to make sure that your application is progressing appropriately. So if your application is listed as in progress, that means that you've started the application, but you have not submitted it yet. There is work to do on your part. Once you click submit, that status is going to change to received. And received means that we have received your application, but we have not yet received your transcripts or your test scores. So when it's in received, that also does not mean that you are done. That just means that the AACOMS application is in our system, but it is still considered incomplete until we have received your test scores and your transcripts. So if you've noticed that your application is stuck in that received area, that means that we're waiting on those 2 things. So you want to double check and make sure that you've properly sent both of those things to us. Once we receive your transcripts and your test scores, we're going to move your application to the complete status. And so that means that we've received everything that we need from you, and we've sent it over to our verification team to verify all of the coursework that you've listed in your application. Like I said, that process can take up to 10 days. So if you've sent everything and it says don't panic if it hasn't moved from complete to verified and it's been less than 2 weeks, because it does take a little bit of time. But once everything has been verified and your GPA has been calculated, then of course your status will move to verified. And that's the point at which you can say that you are done with everything that you need to do on your end. And now you're just waiting to hear from the COM about next steps. So I can't emphasize this enough. Please, please, please make it a regular practice to check the status of your application in AACOMS so that if anything goes awry, you're able to catch it sooner rather than later. Because like I said, these COMs are doing rolling admissions. A little bit about the nuts and bolts of what it costs to apply. So there is a primary application fee, and then there is an additional designation fee. So the primary application fee is going to cover the AACOM application being sent to one school, and that fee is $198. For any additional school that you want to apply to beyond that first school, there's going to be an additional designation fee. This cycle for the 2024-2025 cycle, that cost is $57. It's going up just a little bit for the next cycle for 2025 to 2026. It's going to cost $60 per additional designation. So as you're working on your budget for applying to med school, definitely keep those costs in mind. If those costs are prohibitive, I do want to make you aware that AACOM does have a fee waiver program to assist eligible students. If you are approved for a fee waiver, the waiver will cover the cost of the initial application only. So it does not cover the cost of additional designations, but it will cover the $198 cost of that primary application with that first designation. And if you're eligible for an AACOM waiver, you might be eligible for a waiver of the secondary application fees. That's up to the discretion of the COM, so you'll want to reach out to your school of interest and ask them about that. But that fee waiver program is available to qualified applicants. We do encourage you to wait until you're ready or almost ready to apply to medical school to apply to the fee waiver program, because once you're approved for a fee waiver, it's only valid for 14 days. You have to submit it within that 14-day window or your waiver will be forfeit. So don't apply to the fee waiver until you're ready or almost ready to hit submit on your application. And the application for the fee waiver program is actually inside the AACOM application. So when you log into your dashboard, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner when you click on your little icon with your name, there'll be a drop-down option that says fee waiver, and you can click on that and it'll take you right to the application. If you have questions about whether or not you qualify for a fee waiver, feel free to email us directly. I know that everyone has their own individual circumstances, and so we're happy to address your specific scenario. If you have questions, I will share our email contact information at the end of this presentation. But for now, I do want to share just a couple of helpful resources before we switch over to taking questions from you all. So one is the AACOM Customer Service Center. We do have a help center that's fully searchable online. Any question you can think about AACOM, I promise you it's probably already been answered in our online help center. So you can search through and there's an FAQ for every single page of the AACOM application if you have questions about entering your courses, if you have questions about, adding an evaluator, if you have questions about anything that you encounter in the application, the help center is going to be your best friend. If it just so happens that you're not able to find an answer to your question in the help center, you can contact customer service directly. That phone number and that email address is listed on the screen here. We do also have a little virtual assistant that will pop up in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And so if you have a quick or an easily answered question, you can type that in there and Cassie, our little chat bot, might be able to help you out there. The second thing that I want to share with you is the DO Explorer. That's our name for our online database that has information about every single COM within our network. And this is a free tool that's available to you. All you have to do is sign up with an email address, and that puts you in our system, that gives you a free account, and you're able to go in and see full profiles of all of the COMs in our network and compare them. There's a comparison tool so you can select, the 3 schools that you're looking at, and it'll spit out a side-by-side kind of comparison chart. And it's got everything you could want to know about a COM, information about the location, the size, application deadlines, how much tuition costs for in-state and out-of-state, average MCAT, average GPA, information about the campus mission, information about when it was founded, information about dual degree programs if you're interested in, earning an additional degree alongside your DO. We do have a number of schools that have those opportunities. So it's really a great resource. If you haven't already checked it out, I really encourage you to create that free account and go in there and play around with it. You'll probably be surprised by just how many schools might be a good fit for you. Dr. Martin, what was your experience like with, trying to decide where to apply and making your short list? What were you looking at?
Yeah, this is an amazing tool. I mean, you get everything right there together. You're not popping to 20 different websites and be like, oh, what did that one say about this tuition? And so this is super neat. I don't think it was this robust when I applied. I wish I would have had this tool, but you kind of have to make a priority list for yourself, and that's part of the fun. What are the things that I'm looking for out of my medical school? Geography oftentimes plays into your decision. What part of the country do I want to be in? What's my personal mission, and does that align with the mission and values of the COM that I'm looking at? Those are some of the things that I used when I was kind of making my list. But I think my list would have been a lot more complete if I could have used this tool.
Fair enough. Well, I'm glad to have that perspective from you, that it's helpful. And that's generally the feedback that we get from students who use this tool, is that it's an amazing kind of one-stop shop. And I will say this one more time for those who didn't catch it. It is a free tool. It is 100% cost-free for you to create an account in our system and to get access to this. So I will share the link with you at the end of this slide. Please, 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 if you don't do anything else today, make sure you make an account so that you have access to this to be able to explore your options. For those of you that are a little bit further away from applying to medical school, you might find our pre-med timeline helpful. We've curated a list of activities that will help you develop a competitive medical school application based on your year in college. So if we happen to have any middle or high school folks on this call today, we do have a pre-college tab with activities that you can do before you even apply to college. And then we've got tabs here for years 1 through 4 of undergrad. We've got some really helpful information in there about shadowing a DO, how to go about getting in touch with a DO and setting up a potential shadow opportunity. And for anyone who is taking a gap year or who is maybe coming to medicine as a second career, we do have a post-college tab on that page as well that has some information about what you can do at that point in your career to become a competitive applicant. So all that information is available for you for free on our website. Of course, if you are a current undergraduate student on a campus and you have a pre-health advisor, your pre-health advisor is going to be, if not your number one, definitely in your top folks that you want to talk to about becoming an osteopathic doctor and the application process and that sort of thing. If you don't have a pre-med advisor on your campus, you're always welcome to reach out to us directly. I will share our contact information here, choosedo@acom.org. That email address comes directly to me and my team. So if you have any questions about anything you heard here today, or if you have questions about things that were not covered today, you're welcome to shoot us an email and we will get right back to you. That QR code that you see in the middle there, if you've got your phone handy, you can scan that QR code and that will take you to our DO Explorer page, and a little screen will pop up to prompt you to create an account, and you enter your email address, and then boom, you're right into the Explorer and you can start checking out schools. And I will let Renee from MedSchoolCoach, our gracious host, pop on and tell you a little bit about her half of this slide.
Thank you so much. That was such an awesome presentation, and I learned a ton. Just to tell you guys all a little bit about MedSchoolCoach if you don't know about us. So MedSchoolCoach is a company that's been around for over a decade, and basically we help medical students or pre-meds apply to medical school. There's so many great questions out there, and so many of them are, how do I choose schools? Am I competitive enough? What letters of recommendation should I do? How should I write my personal statement? Those are all things we help cover. We have physician advisors who work with our students. And so physician advisors like Dr. Martin and myself, we've been here, we've gone through these applications, we've seen how difficult it is. And now we've been on the other side and been on admissions committees. So we kind of have seen both sides of the process and are just here to help students be successful with their application. So definitely check us out. We have a ton of free information as well. I will second the DO Explorer because that is such an awesome resource. Briana, I use that a lot as well. So that is a great resource. MedSchoolCoach and our sister website, perspectivedoctor.com, have a ton of information. So please check us out. We'd love to hear from you. And I saw a lot of people on the poll are applying this cycle. So coming up in the next few months. So this is definitely the time to get started with us. Thank you again, Briana and Dr. Martin. That was an excellent presentation. I think we could probably move over to the Q&A at this point. There's a ton of questions. We won't get to them all, but we'll try to get to a lot of them. And I try to, when I do these Q&As, I try to find questions that a lot of people have asked or are common questions or kind of themes to questions. So I'm going to start with one about letters of recommendation. So there's a lot of questions out there about, I know you said, Briana, these are school specific, but what guidance do you give students that are applying to DO schools for letters of recommendation? And in particular, do they need a letter of recommendation from a DO physician?
That's a great question. Dr. Martin, do you want to take this one or would you like me?
Go ahead. I can chime in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be case by school in terms of whether or not the schools require a DO. I think once upon a time, most of our comms did require at least one letter to come from a DO, and some of them have changed that requirement a little bit now to come from a physician. So it could be an MD or a DO. Obviously, if you have access to a DO, that would be phenomenal. And that's another way to demonstrate to the admissions committee that you're familiar with osteopathic medicine. But like I said, everyone doesn't live near a DO, and so that may or may not be possible. But if you have the opportunity to get some clinical experience or to build a relationship with a physician, I think that can fill that requirement. Dr. Martin, what would you say?
I totally agree. It always helps, I think, like if I'm looking through and, oh, one of these is, from a DO, how did that interaction go and stuff like that. But admission committees also know, if there's not a requirement, we know that it can be hard, especially post-COVID, to be able to get into offices and shadow osteopathic physicians. And if it were me interviewing and I wasn't able to get, an application, a letter of recommendation from a DO, I would kind of let the committee know that. I'd be like, I really wanted to shadow a DO. I tried, and I wasn't able to make that happen before the application cycle ended. So.
Yeah, that's great. One other question kind of tagging along to that is the personal statement and their application. Many students apply to MD and DO schools concurrently. With the personal statement, do you recommend that students say something specific about DO and why they want to practice OMM or osteopathic medicine specifically?
The answer to that question is yes, you should absolutely write a separate personal statement for the AACOM application. I think that's probably the number one, I won't say mistake, but it's the number one thing that we see that might make us wrinkle our nose a little bit is if we can tell that you did not put any effort into being specific to osteopathic medicine in your personal statement. Because the field is so mission driven, we want to know that osteopathic medicine resonates with you. Dr. Martin, does that track with your experience?
100%. I second Regina's head shake. I totally agree. Absolutely. We want to know about that. We want to know if it's important to you and why it's important to you. I don't want you to relist all of the osteopathic tenets. Like, I know those, right? You don't need to tell me what they are again. But I do want to know, how do those osteopathic tenets resonate with who you are? That's kind of what you're trying to get across in that personal statement. This is why I match up with those things or why I want to do that.
Great. What about, there's some questions out there. I know you talked a bit about OMM in the beginning and you shared the video. Some of the questions are, what about in kind of, I guess, non-primary care related specialties? Like if you're an OB-GYN or you're a trauma surgeon, is OMM still incorporated into those fields as well?
I would give it, in fact, head shake yes. Also, I can give an example. There was a study that came out about post-surgical patients taken care of by general surgeons in the hospital. and they're looking at time to discharge and amount of post-op ileus and things like that. And there are specific OMM treatments that we do for patients that are in the hospital, that are on ventilators, or that have pneumonia. And so we can find a way to work OMM into any specialty that you can imagine. Somebody asked me about psychiatry the other day. Well, psychiatry can't use OMM. I'm like, what other specialty do you think the patients maybe need a healing touch? It might be psychiatry, right? So I think we can fit it in anywhere.
That's awesome. And just to, put my plug in there, I learned nothing about OMN as an MD. I didn't know it existed until I was in residency and I worked alongside osteopathic medicine physicians, and I was like, can you do that on me? Like, we would seriously have other family medicine physicians take us into the room and do the OMM for our back pain, our neck pain. I would go walk over to the next room and be like, hey, I have this patient that has X, Y, and Z going on right now. Can I send them to you? Can they come make an appointment with you? Because it is a skill that MDs don't learn.
She was referring patients to osteopathic physicians to get OMM treatment, which is awesome. I'm wondering, looking in the Q&A just for some more questions. Let's see here. How about this one? Do you have any advice for Canadian applicants applying to USDO schools? Is that different in any way?
I had actually put that in the chat. I responded to that. The DO Explorer allows people to filter on that because Canadian schools would be still kind of considered international. So it would be listed there of which programs will accept international students, which Canadian would.
Another plug for the DO Explorer. It's one of the filters. You can filter for schools that accept international students. You can filter for in-state versus out-of-state.
I'm wondering, a lot of questions in here about cutoffs for GPA and MCAT. I'm just wondering, I know, MD schools and DO schools in the US generally don't have strict cutoffs, but I'm wondering, like, is there any kind of ballpark ranges that you guys expect students to meet for DO schools?
I will say that this does also vary from school to school. I apologize that that's the answer for so many questions, but that is how it is. Some schools do have very specific minimums that they want you to meet. Most schools don't have published minimums, but you are able to see in the DO Explorer what the average is for every school. And that'll give you a sense of if you're in the ballpark range of what schools typically admit, even if they don't have a published minimum. Dr. Martin, what would you add to that?
I was going to say, I served on our admissions committee, and I couldn't even tell you what the cutoffs are. We're actually, we get blinded to a lot of that stuff, so we don't know some of those things. I think it helps us do a better job of kind of looking at the whole applicant sometimes instead of just those numbers. So
a lot of questions about rolling admissions and like whether applying later in the cycle puts you at a disadvantage. I had one student talking about, she was taking her MCAT mid-June, which would mean that her score won't be released till July. Do you recommend that students try to take the MCAT earlier, or that if they do take the MCAT over the summer, is it still possible for them to gain an acceptance at an osteopathic medical school?
I think that depends on when you're planning to start. So the cycle, I see Regina's hand is raised. So I'm going to pass it to her before I finish. Go ahead, Regina.
I was going to say, again, in the DO Explorer, the colleges list the latest MCAT score that they will accept for that particular cycle. So not to feel like a broken record, to sound like a broken record, but the DO Explorer has more information than you ever want to ask. Yeah, Regina for the win. I got you.
That's perfect. That's exactly where I was going, Regina. I was just going to warn people because you specifically mentioned June, that because of the overlapping cycles, that could be a little confusing. So if you're planning to start in the fall, then that June score is probably going to be too late because the cycle closes in June. But if you're planning to start in the following year, then more than likely you're going to be okay, but you definitely want to check the Explorer to find out when the latest acceptable MCAT is.
Can you talk a little bit about residency options? And I know you did in the beginning as well, and kind of the fact that a couple years ago, the residencies combined. So there's used to be separate DO and MD residencies, some had overlap, but now there's complete overlap. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Dr. Martin, I'm going to let you take that one.
Sure. Yeah, it was that, oh my gosh, am I going to apply to the allopathic residency or am I going to apply to the osteopathic residency program? And which is which? And are they both at the same place? And it's really nice now. It's just all one big system.
Yeah.
You apply and go through the match. As a DO, you can go to a community-based residency program if you want to. You can go to an academic medical center. I interviewed at all of those places and ended up, ranking at my first choice. So you can be competitive and go wherever you want to go. I think that there are certain programs that have a higher percentage of osteopathic physicians in their programs, and that can be by region, and some that may have a little bit higher allopathic count. And you can always see that on their websites, but you definitely have many more options available to you now, and really no restrictions. There's actually legislation that's been proposed that looks at just this, that we don't want the residency programs to pick you whether you're a DO or an MD.
Yeah.
We want them to just pick you if you're the right fit for their program.
Yeah. That's so awesome. And I'm so glad we were able to close on that because, like I said, I get that question a lot. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And I'm, I think it's great to clear that. Especially too, at the end of the day, you're training together and your residencies are together, and then you're going to go and be practicing physicians together. So, anyways, we are right at 8 o'clock on the East Coast. I think we should wrap things up. Briana, Dr. Martin, you guys were excellent. This was super helpful. Again, I learned so much tonight, and thank you so much. I hope everyone checks out the AACOM, to say it. AACOM resources out there, MedSchoolCoach resources. You guys were great. This is so helpful. Any closing thoughts or remarks?
I will just say thank you all so much for attending. And if we did not get to your question today, we are happy to answer it offline. You can just shoot us an email. I put it in the chat. It's chooseo@acom.org, and we're happy to talk to you anytime.
I second that. It's been great to spend the evening with you all and just get to talk about something that we're all obviously super passionate about and are thankful that you're starting to investigate it.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Have a good night, everyone.